I called my lawyer from the parking lot of the Fairmont, and by the time dessert was served, my son no longer had access to a single dollar of the trust I had spent 31 years building. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a dramatic man. I grew up in Sudbury, Ontario, the son of a nickel miner who believed that silence was a form of dignity. My father never raised his voice once in his life, not when the company cut his pension, not when the doctor told him about his lungs. He just nodded, went home, made tea, and figured out what to do next. I inherited that from him. The nodding, the tea, the figuring out. So when I tell you what happened at my daughter-in-law's charity gala, the one that was supposed to celebrate my granddaughter's foundation, the one I had quietly funded to the tune of $60,000, I need you to understand that everything I did that night, I did slowly, calmly, and without raising my voice once. My name is not important. People around here call me Gord. I am 67 years old. I retired 4 years ago after selling the last of 3 commercial properties I owned in the Kitchener-Waterloo corridor. Before that, I ran an industrial supply company for 22 years. I am not wealthy in a way that announces itself. I drive a 2019 Ford F-150. I wear flannel shirts I bought at Marks. My boots are Blundstones and they are 7 years old. I have never owned a boat or a ski chalet or anything that requires a separate insurance policy to impress people at a dinner party. My son. I'll call him by what his mother used to call him when he was small, which was simply the boy, because that is what he became again that night, married his wife 9 years ago. She is not from here. She grew up in Forest Hill, Toronto, in the kind of house where the cleaning lady had a cleaning lady. She has nothing against me personally. What she has against me is that I exist, that I show up, and that my granddaughter, her daughter, my son's daughter, the 8-year-old who calls me Grandpa Gord, and once told me I smelled like coffee and sawdust, and that she liked it, loves me without being told to. My granddaughter's name is June. She was born in June, which her mother thought was poetic, and her father thought was convenient, since they hadn't agreed on a name yet. June is the reason I still get up early on Saturday mornings. She is the reason I learned how to make French toast with the cinnamon on the outside instead of mixed in. She is, without question, the best thing my son has ever done. 2 years ago, June came home from school and told me that her class had learned about children in Northern Ontario communities who didn't have access to proper winter clothing. She was 7. She sat at my kitchen table with a glass of apple juice and told me this with the gravity of a senator. She said, "Grandpa Gord, I want to do something." I said, "Okay." She said, "Will you help me?" I said, "Always." We started small. I helped her write letters. We collected coats at her school. By the end of that winter, we had donated over 300 jackets, 40 pairs of boots, and enough mittens to cover a small army. A woman from the local paper came and took a photo of June standing next to 2 giant garbage bags of winter gear, grinning like she'd won something. She had. Her mother saw the photo and got very interested very quickly. Within 6 months, there was a registered charitable foundation in June's name. Her mother was the executive director. I was listed as a founding donor. By the time the gala was announced, a fundraising dinner at the Fairmont in downtown Toronto, tickets at $350 each, silent auction, open bar, the whole production, I had contributed $60,000 of my own money, quietly, through my accountant, no press release, no speech, no ask for recognition. I did not know I was not invited until I was already there. I drove down from Kitchener on a Thursday evening, 2.5 hours in light traffic. I had my suit dry cleaned. It's a navy suit I bought in 2019 for my brother's retirement dinner. It still fits. I polished my shoes. I even got a haircut, which my barber Marco said was long overdue, and I told him he wasn't wrong. I arrived at the Fairmont at 6:45. The lobby smelled the way expensive lobbies always smell, like flowers and money and other people's ambition. I gave my name at the registration table, the young woman behind it. She could not have been older than 25. Very put together. Earpiece in one ear, ran her finger down a printed list, and then looked up at me with the particular expression people use when they want to seem apologetic but actually feel nothing. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't see you here. I said Try Gordon, or just the last name. She looked again, same expression. I'm afraid you're not on the list, sir. I stood there for a moment. The lobby was filling up. I could hear music from the ballroom. I recognized a city councillor from Mississauga walking past with a glass of white wine, laughing at something his companion said. This is the June Harrington Foundation Gala, I said. Yes, it is. I'm June's grandfather. She blinked. I understand, but I can only admit guests on the confirmed list, and your name isn't here. I'm so sorry. I nodded. My father's son. I said, thank you, and I walked back outside. I stood on Wellington Street for about 4 minutes. It was early October, that particular Canadian October cold that hasn't decided yet whether it's serious. I didn't have my coat because I'd checked it. I thought about going back in to retrieve it and decided against it, because going back in meant walking past that table again, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. I called my son. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Then I did something I almost never do. I calls my daughter-in-law directly. We are not close. We are not enemies. We are two people who love the same child from a respectful distance. She answered on the third ring. Background noise. The same music I'd heard inside. Gordon, she said. Not surprised. Not warm. Just the word. I'm outside, I said. There seems to be a problem with the guest list. A pause. Long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. Gordon, I should have called you. We had to make some cuts to the list because the room has a capacity restriction, and we had so many corporate sponsors who needed seats, and I assumed you'd understand. You assumed I'd understand that I wasn't invited to the gala for the foundation I funded. You're listed as a donor, Gordon. Your contribution is acknowledged in the program. I looked up at the Fairmont. Beautiful building. I've always liked old stone. Is June there? I asked. She's with her nanny tonight. It's an adult event. Right, I said. I see. Gordon, I really am sorry. We can arrange something. A lunch, a thank you dinner. I'll have my assistant. That's fine, I said. Don't worry about it. I hung up. I sat in my truck for a few minutes with the heat running. I was parked on a side street, meter paid, the way I always do because I don't like parking garages. I thought about my father. I thought about what he would have done. He would have driven home, made tea, and figured out what to do next. I took out my phone and I called Martin. Martin has been my lawyer for 19 years. He is the kind of man who answers calls at 7 in the evening because he says his wife prefers him distracted at dinner. He is methodical and dry and occasionally very funny in a way that takes you a moment to catch. He picked up on the second ring. Gord, he said, you're not calling about the Waterloo property. No, I said, I'm calling about the foundation. I told him what I knew. I told him what I suspected. I asked him to pull the charitable registration documents and the governance structure and tell me what my rights were as a founding donor. He said he'd have something for me in an hour. I told him to take his time. Then I called my accountant, a woman named Beverly who has managed my finances for 12 years, and who once told me that the only difference between smart money and foolish money is patience. I told her I needed a full accounting of everything I had contributed to the June Harrington Foundation, every transfer, every date, every purpose. She said she'd email it to me before morning. I sat in my truck a while longer. A couple walked past on the sidewalk, laughing, the woman's heels clicking on the wet pavement. I thought about June at home with her nanny, probably asleep by now, probably curled around the stuffed polar bear I'd bought her at the Science Center 2 years ago. She named it Biscuit. She has never explained why. Martin called back in 50 minutes. The structure of the foundation was, let's say, interesting. As executive director, my daughter-in-law had broad discretionary authority over programming and events, but the founding donor agreement, which my own lawyer had drafted and which everyone had signed, included a governance clause that required the board to notify founding donors of all major fundraising events and to offer them the opportunity to attend at no cost. It was standard language. The kind of thing nobody reads until somebody needs to. Nobody had notified me. Nobody had offered me a seat. Martin also flagged something else. The board of directors, which was supposed to have 5 members including an independent community representative, currently had 3. My daughter-in-law, my son, and a woman I'd never heard of, who turned out to be my daughter-in-law's college roommate. There had been no AGM in the second year of operation. The minutes from the first year were incomplete. "Is this a problem?" I asked. "For them," Martin said, "potentially, yes. What are my options?" What were my options? He walked me through them. I listened. I asked 2 questions. Then I said, "Let's start with the letter." Martin drafted a formal letter that night on his firm's letterhead, addressed to the board of the June Harrington Foundation. It outlined the governance clause violation, the incomplete board structure, the absence of annual meeting documentation, and formally requested a full financial audit of foundation activities and expenditures to date. It also noted, politely, that as the source of the primary founding contribution, I retained the right to apply for a board seat under the original incorporation documents, a right I was now formally exercising. He sent it by email at 11:43 that night, copied to the CRA's Charities Directorate and to a partner at his firm who specializes in non-profit governance. I was home in Kitchener by 10. I had tea. I went to bed. My son called me the next morning at 7:15. I was already up. I had French toast on the griddle because I promised June I'd make it for her that Saturday, and I was practicing the cinnamon technique. "Dad," he said, and his voice was the voice of a man who had not slept. "What is the letter?" "It's a letter from my lawyer," I said. "Are you eating?" "I've got French toast on." "Dad, why would you do this?" "Because I was asked to stand on the sidewalk outside a gala that my money funded," I said, "and I have decided not to simply accept that." There was a long silence. I flipped the French toast. Got the timing wrong. Little too dark on that one. Still edible. "Vanessa is very upset," he said. "Vanessa, my daughter-in-law." I had been calling her my daughter-in-law in my own thoughts for so long that hearing her name felt slightly strange, like hearing a word you've only ever read pronounced out loud for the first time. "I imagine she is," I said. "She says the list was a logistical issue, that there was no intention to—" "I know what she says," I said. "I spoke with her." "Then why?" "Because intention isn't the only thing that matters," I said. "I have spent 19 years in business. I know that. Outcomes matter. Governance matters. The foundation has June's name on it. I will not allow June's name to be attached to something that is not run properly." He was quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing. "What do you want?" he said finally. That question. I had been asked it before, in business, and I always thought it was the most honest question a person could ask when they realized they were in a losing position. "What do you want?" Not "I'm sorry." Not "how can I fix this?" "What do you want?" Which means, "what will it take?" Which means, "I understand now that you have leverage, and I am asking you to name your price." I didn't have a price. "I want the foundation to be run properly," I said. "I want board meetings documented. I want an independent director appointed. I want June's name to mean something good in 20 years. Another silence. "And the lawyer?" "Martin stays involved until I'm satisfied the governance issues are corrected. That's not negotiable." My son said he would call me back. He didn't call that day. He called Sunday evening, and his voice was different, flatter, quieter, the way people sound when they have worked through the anger and arrived at something more like resignation. Vanessa, he said, was willing to restructure the board. She was willing to bring in an independent director. She was requesting through him that I withdraw the inquiry to the CRA Directorate. I spoke with Martin. He said withdrawing the inquiry was possible, but only after the corrections were made and documented, not before. I relayed this. My son said fine. In November, a retired school principal from Guelph, named, I'll keep her name out of this, she didn't ask to be in any story, joined the board as the independent director. The AGM was held in December with proper notice. I attended, quietly, in my Navy suit. I sat in the back. I did not make a speech. June was there for the first 20 minutes because Vanessa had decided, I think correctly, that the foundation should actually involve June sometimes. My granddaughter sat beside me during those 20 minutes. She had a juice box. She whispered something to me about Biscuit, the polar bear, having learned a new trick, which turned out to be lying very still, her words, which she seemed to find funnier than I was able to fully appreciate, but I laughed anyway, because when you are 67 and your granddaughter is 8, and she whispers something to you in a room full of adults and lawyers, you laugh. That's just what you do. Afterward, in the parking lot, June held my hand on the way to my truck. She said, "Grandpa Gord, are you and Mommy friends now?" I thought about that. I thought about what my father would have said. I thought about what was true and what was useful and whether, at 8 years old, those two things needed to be the same. "We're working on it," I said. She seemed to accept this. She asked if we could get a hot chocolate on the way home. I said yes. We went to a Tim Hortons on Stone Road and I had a medium coffee, double-double, the way I always do, and she had a small hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, the way she always does, and we sat in a booth by the window and watched the snow come down on Guelph in December, which is one of the quieter, more honest things this country does. I did not tell her what I had done. She is 8. She does not need to know. What she needs to know is that her grandfather shows up, that when someone tells him he is not on the list, he finds another way in, and that he will spend the rest of his life making sure her name means something worth having. She'll understand the rest when she's ready. Until then, there's French toast on Saturday. The cinnamon goes on the outside. That's the trick.